Hello, good morning. This is Rachel Price, and I apologize for the faint webcam down here. I've done some Googling and researching and cannot for the life of me find out why it is so faint. I've adjusted the lighting in my home office and nothing. So I apologize for that. Um, so I just want to start off by saying I have learned so much in this class. I think when I've worked in a classroom for a few years, and I think when you see a kid and you think that they're just acting up or, just acting out in a way that you feel, why can't they control that? When you take a course like this, it shows you that some things are out of their control, some things they need your help with. So I think that this class has been awesome in showing me that. So this first slideshow, I just kind of titled it Different Disabilities. And the first one I start off with is ODD, or Oppositional Defiant Disorder. And we actually see this quite often. I didn't know it had a technical term for it because I don't get to discuss a lot with our SPED teachers, but when I saw this title, it kind of clicked and I thought, okay, this makes sense now. ODD, or Oppositional Defiant Disorder, is basically a child that doesn't see an authoritative figure as someone that they need to listen to or pay attention to. They will argue, regardless of if they are right or wrong. They will be, I always thought it was very stubborn, that it was a choice that they were making. You know, if I asked a student to, hey, let's go out to recess, even if they wanted to, they would say, I don't want to, or cross their arms and do the, and I always thought it was just being very stubborn, but in fact, it's something that they're really struggling with. Ways that I would probably help a child with ODD is maybe have them follow a behavior contract. That way they have a goal, they have something that they're working toward. And I would also caution instructors or paras or whoever is working with the child not to step into an argument with them. I found myself, getting into not verbal battles or altercations or anything like that, but more like disagreeing with the child. And it is just an over and over and over again power struggle. So I learned very quickly just to step back from the situation and move on. So the next one, attention deficit disorder, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And we see this a lot as well. And I know a lot of our kids in our classroom are medicated to try to help with this. And you can definitely tell when they're not on their medication. And that happens a lot also. And again, I think it's something that, this is a neurological disorder that they cannot help. Can't sit still. They blurt out a lot. We have one child that just blurts out continuously, and you could see it in his face. He feels bad, but he just is constantly blurting out. And so, can't sit still, talk frequently. They like to interrupt. And I like to talk to the kids, and I'm very open about the fact that I too struggle with ADHD. I find myself doing things like when someone's asking me a question, I'm trying to think of an answer before they're even done talking. It's very hard for me to sit still. I'm very loud. I'm very vocal. So I talk to the kids a lot about things that I struggle with and things that help me. I think alternative seating can be a good and a bad thing. If they can't sit still and they're bobbing all over or kicking the bands on the ends of their chair, they can really struggle. I think helping them with things like putting the figure 8 on their on their desk, and they can trace that to kind of relax them or calm them down. I also think assigning peer tutors is a great thing. They can have a peer role model. I think that those are two great ways to kind of help kids in the classroom. And I personally love the idea of more recess, but I know that that's a district thing. So a child that's apathetic, someone that shows little or no emotion for someone else or something for something that someone else is going through. And it might not just be someone else. It might be things in their life that they just say that they don't care about. They don't really care that they're getting a bad grade. They don't really care that they're hurting someone's feelings. And I know that this can be a very scary thing, because it's hard. If a child's feeling apathetic, it's very hard to get them to see someone else's situation or what someone else is going through. So there's a lot of hurt feelings that go around, I think. And I think that ways to kind of help a student that's apathetic is to find something that they are super excited about, something that they are very interested in, and kind of adding those things into your curriculum so that they are finding it interesting and that they do care. We have a student that is apathetic, and it is a struggle to deal with him, but we did find things that he loved to do, and he would get so excited about it. So there were things that he would get very excited about and was very passionate about, and it was so exciting to see that. Because we do have to remember that these are things that they can't help. And I think that that is the struggle for educators a lot of the time is, why can't they just control themselves? Why can't they have self-restraint? We need to work on the 7 steps, but this class helped me to see that sometimes these kids, they can't help it. They just can't help it. Attention seeker. This is another one of those that I struggle with because it can be a positive or a negative thing. We have several kids at our Title I school that are in the foster system, the foster care system. They haven't gotten any attention their whole life. They've had parents that either struggled with some kind of addiction or just they were abandoned. The kids were abandoned. So these are kids that for the first time in their life, they're having peers or educators pay attention to them. Who can fault them for wanting to gain more of that attention? So, and I know that it can be done in good and in bad ways. You know, maybe they strive to get great grades so that they get that encouragement or that way to go. Or it could be in a negative way. Maybe they scream, throw chairs, you know, I don't know, do other negative things to get that attention. But in the end, I think we need to realize that they're seeking that attention for a reason, and kind of digging down deep and finding out why they're needing that attention is very important. I think ways to help an attention seeker might be to not notice that negative attention. Just ignore that negative attention, because that'll just keep that cycle going, and really, really encourage that positive attention. Kind of like our Give 'em 5 in the management class I just took. You know, kind of look at them, explain to them what you see that they're doing wrong, but then kind of maybe point out some positives so it's not just all on the negative. That 4-to-1 ratio. And I just stuck this slide in here because I thought it was kind of a cool slide. It showed just the different learning disabilities. There's a lot that kids go through that we don't realize. We just look at those tests, we teach to the test, and we look at those tests and wonder why they're not getting great scores. And man, kids are really struggling with a lot of different things. Auditory processing disorder. I found this one very interesting because they have that sound that's going into their ears, but by the time it gets into their brain, they're processing it completely different than maybe the way that it entered in through their ears. And I know that it might not even be very subtle differences in the way things sound. It's just not clear to them. I know we have some kids that have auditory processing issues. Excuse me. And they'll struggle with any kind of background noise. Sometimes in assemblies, if it gets too loud, we'd like to do earmuffs on them. And I know we find very quiet places in the classroom for them to work or that they feel comfortable and calm in. But I know that any kind of background noise, you know, I get annoyed when my husband and child chew loud at the table, but it's a different kind of annoyed. I can still deal with things and process things, and these kids just can't. Dyslexia. Again, we have quite a few kids in our class that struggle with dyslexia, and the way I think of dyslexia is if I have a word say I have the word dog, right? D-O-G on a piece of paper. I see it as dog, but that child might see those letters all flip-flopped around. So that's why I picked this picture. I just thought it was a perfect representation of what I see dyslexia as. And a person with dyslexia might struggle with spelling, reading, understanding, comprehension. I would try to have books on devices so they can hear versus read. And I would also make sure to provide materials before some curriculum or a lesson that I would teach on that curriculum. I might also try to overlook some spelling errors on tests and things like that and look mainly for comprehension of the material versus the way that they're spelling, and then maybe go through and talk to them about some of the things that they misspelled, but not counting that as a grade. Autism spectrum disorder. We know from the case studies that we did that autism is a disability that can affect children in many different ways. Some kids you might notice just a little bit of a repetitive nature. When they engage in acts, it might just be repetitive and that might be it. Others might just totally have a meltdown when schedules change, things like that. But we know from some of the case studies that we reviewed that there are just many different levels of autism. And there are many different things that we can do in a classroom to help a child that is dealing with autism, that is autistic. My suggestions would be it's dependent upon the situation. If a kid is struggling with schedule issues, keep a schedule right there on the board. Try very hard to not let it change. If something changes, maybe let them go to their normal schedule while the rest of the class does something different. If a autistic child is struggling with some sensory stuff. I know we had a kid that could not sit on the floor. It just bothered him, so we made sure that he sat in a chair all the time. So I think it's just dependent on the situation. I'm having to speed through now. I'm already at 12 minutes. TBI or traumatic brain injury, someone that has just like it says, a traumatic brain injury, and that can result from an incident like a car wreck, a fall, a sports injury, and not all the results are the same. I put this here because this is a friend of mine's boy, and he got in a car wreck about a week before his graduation, and he had a TBI, and he can no longer walk. And he is very deficit in his learning and things like that. And he really, really struggles. He's in a wheelchair, and he really struggles with things. And that injury will not heal. So blindness, students who have a visual impairment makes it hard for them to complete activities in class. I would probably have Braille available for students, things like that, and maybe some sensory items that they can feel and touch during my lesson. Deafness is when there is any type of hearing loss in an individual. This doesn't have to include hearing loss of 100%. And I put a quote on there, under the IDEA, hearing impairment that is so severe that the child is impaired in processing linguistic information through hearing with or without amplification. So this doesn't have to be total deafness. It can just be some hearing loss. I would be careful not to turn my back to a student and not to put them in the back row. That way they can be close to me and see the board and see me. Giftedness, when a child is able to work above normal of what students their age are working on. And my greatest fear is not recognizing when a child is gifted and having them tested. So I think it's important to be aware of when a child comes in and is gifted and has that needs that extra work, because I would assign them tiered lessons, possibly different tests, adding in spelling words, harder words, things like that. So thank you so much, and I have just really enjoyed this class. I've learned so much with it, and I've printed off most of my notes so I can keep them handy.